Often get questions, how can I simply process my audio for, say, example, YouTube videos or a video that's an interview, and do that within my nonlinear editor, within my video editing app? Well, here's one way to do that, especially for those that don't necessarily want to kind of dive into the world of audio processing and become a mix engineer or anything like that. Here's a pretty simple way to do it. I do recommend you learn these fundamentals at some point and learn how to do this on your own. But for those that are in a hurry, here's an example. We're going to be using a plugin called DialogueEnhance2 from a company called Accentize. In this case, I'm going to demonstrate this in Davinci Resolve. This is in version 18. It also works in Final Cut Pro. It also works in Premiere, so you can use it in any of those. And of course, for those amongst us that do work in digital audio workstations, it does work in most digital audio workstations as well. You have an AU version on Mac as well as a VST version, and this is an example of how that works. So I can go ahead and drag this to this particular clip, or in this case, I can go ahead and drag it to this track. So we'll just go ahead and drop it in here as an effect on this track. And we're just going to be using this top track here tonight. So let's go ahead and take a listen. I'm going to go ahead and get back to the start. Let me play. I'm going to go ahead and take this plug in here, and we're going to go ahead and turn everything off. And we're going to bring them on one at a time as we walk through this. But let me just play for you where we're starting. We're going to get into Davinci Resolve just a little bit, specifically the Fairlight panel. The Fairlight panel is, of course, the digital audio workstation part of Davinci Resolve. And okay, a few problems there. Fan is very prominent. Overall, the levels are too low. Let's go ahead and take care of some of those things and see what we get here. So first thing I'm going to do is turn on the noise reduction. So we have 4 modules. We have noise reduction, dynamics control, think compressor. We also have spectral correction, think equalizer. And we also have a loudness boost. And for each of these, you can turn them on or off individually, but you also have whatever controls are associated with that particular module down below. So for noise reduction, you have one control, and that is how much reduction do you want to do? It's going to identify the noise, and this is, once it's figured out what's noise and what's not noise, which dialogue, this is how much it's going to reduce that noise. That's what this setting does. So let's go ahead and play through and see where we end up here. We're going to get into Davinci Resolve just a little bit, specifically the Fairlight panel. The Fairlight panel is, of course, the digital audio workstation part of Davinci Resolve. And it's pretty amazing that Davinci Resolve includes not only a video editing app, color grading, compositing, and digital audio workstation all in one. It is also very affordable. Okay, let's start there. We can always come back and tune that. Next up, let's get our dynamics control going. And what I'm going to do here is, it's actually pretty hard to hear this because this overall levels are pretty quiet. I'm going to go ahead and turn on the loudness boost at the end here, and let's go ahead and we're going to put it in automatic mode for now, and we're going to tell it to target, let's say, minus 23. That should be closer to my voice. So let's go ahead and take another shot at the noise reduction here now that we've turned that loudness boost on. So even if you get the studio version, which is the version that includes everything, it's about, I think, $295. Or if you buy a piece, many, not everything, but many of the different options from Blackmagic Design, their hardware, it often comes with a copy of Davinci Resolve, whether it's one of the cinema cameras or I believe the A10 Mini Pro and above comes with it as well. But okay, so what I've noticed here is the reduction. If you dial down to a smaller number, it's not going to remove as much of the noise. If you dial up to a bigger number, the risk is you can start introducing artifacts. It can start to sound like the dialogue itself is being very processed. It starts to maybe take a little bit of a robotic sound, a little bit of a harsh sound. So let's kind of dial that in a little bit more. We're going to get into Davinci Resolve just a little bit, specifically the Fairlight panel. The Fairlight panel, also incidentally for these controls, if I have a control like this, I just click in the middle and I pull down on my mouse to reduce the value, or push up on my mouse to increase the value. Is, of course, the digital audio workstation part of Davinci Resolve. And it's pretty amazing that Davinci Resolve includes not only a video editing app, color grading, compositing, and digital audio workstation all in. I think we'll go probably about right there. Let's go on to dynamics control. Again, this is kind of like a compressor, and the idea here is that it will even things out. So you can see we have a higher amplitude bit here where I talk louder for just a moment, a little bit louder here and then quieter over here. This will help to kind of pull some of these levels down here so that the loudness boost has room to push the overall levels up. Let's go ahead and play through this with it in automatic mode, and then I'll pop it out of automatic mode and play with some of the controls and show you those as well. When we get out of automatic mode, we actually have a control here for ratio. This is how much compression it does in essence. So once, for example, the compressor or the dynamics control gets to this part, the higher the ratio I use, the more it's going to kind of squash this down to get it in line with everything else. What we can do in automatic mode is actually dynamic. It will actually take care of that curve for us. Let's go ahead and try it. We're going to get into Davinci Resolve just a little bit, specifically the Fairlight panel. The Fairlight panel is, of course, the digital audio workstation part of Davinci Resolve. And it's pretty amazing that Davinci Resolve includes not only a video editing app, color grading, compositing, and digital audio workstation all in one. It is also very affordable. So even if you get the studio version, which is now you can see it's actually dynamically changing that as the dialogue goes on. So it might be compressing a little bit more, a little bit less, depending on what is needed here. Pretty nice. And it actually, is it perfect? No. Is it fairly transparent? It's fairly transparent. You can hear that it's being compressed, but it's again, if you need something simple, this is a pretty good option for that. Let me go ahead and go back here. Let's play it again, and let me take it out of automatic mode and show you what happens when we really crank up the ratio. We're going to get into Davinci Resolve just a little bit, specifically the Fairlight panel. The Fairlight panel is, of course, the digital audio workstation part of Davinci Resolve. And it's pretty amazing that Davinci Resolve includes not only you could tell there that we're getting a pretty extreme there. You also do have the option to change. This is the threshold setting. Let me go ahead and show you what that does. When you'll hear it, it'll start to sound really kind of pumpy and really kind of squashed. We're going to get into Davinci Resolve just a little bit, specifically the Fairlight panel. The Fairlight panel is, of course, the digital audio workstation part of Davinci Resolve. And it's pretty amazing that Davinci Resolve includes not only a video editing app, color grading, compositing, and digital audio workstation all in one. It is also very affordable. So even if you get the studio version, which is the version that includes everything, it's about, I think, $295. Or if you buy a piece, many, not everything, but many of the different options from Blackmagic Design, their hardware, it often comes with a copy of Davinci Resolve, whether it's... Okay, so you can see what happens there. So you have these two controls, basically, again, the threshold and the ratio. If we crank the ratio up and pulled the threshold down, it sounded really squashed, and it actually got quieter because it is getting quieter. But you want to kind of fine tune that so it doesn't sound obvious that it's being compressed, but it is managing some of these transients, the things sticking up a fair bit more in the waveform. Again, I think the automatic mode does pretty well. If you didn't understand what any of that means and you want something simple, go to automatic mode. If you do want to tweak it a little bit, you can pop it out of automatic mode. You can change the threshold and the ratio. I would generally, for dialogue, keep it around 2.5 and then just adjust this threshold here so that the peaking comes up to about, right around this symbol here, the threshold symbol, and just barely kind of surpasses that a little bit and gets compressed. Otherwise, if you start cranking it down and it's hitting up and it's going up above this all the time, it's doing a much heavier compression. So you just want to tickle the compressor. You want to tickle this area right here and just barely pass that periodically. Let's go ahead and pop it back into automatic mode and let's move on to spectral correction. Spectral correction is like an equalizer. What does that mean? Well, what this does is it takes, first of all, any low frequency stuff below your voice or the recorded voice, and it removes some of that. So that you're going to have things like air conditioning. Some of the air conditioning noise will be down there. If there's any sort of resonance in the room, really low frequency resonance in the room, you'll have some things down there. And there might be other things in your room. If you have a fan on your computer that's running, this will help to remove some of that, not all of it, but some of it. The noise reduction is going to do some of it as well. But that's one thing. And then it will also look for resonances where you, in your particular recording, have frequencies that are really kind of sticking out and making it sound harsh, this will actually cut those back a little bit as well. So let's demonstrate on my voice. We'll just go ahead and leave it in automatic mode for now. And here we go. We're going to get into Davinci Resolve just a little bit, specifically the Fairlight panel. The Fairlight panel is, of course, the digital audio workstation part of Davinci Resolve. And it's pretty amazing that Davinci Resolve includes not only a video editing app, color grading, compositing, and digital audio workstation all in one. It is also very affordable. So even if you get the student... Okay, you'll notice here it's doing a cut here between about starting maybe around 1 kilohertz and maybe up to 2.5 kilohertz or so. There is actually typically a resonance in my voice, and it's cutting it just a little bit. This is minus 6 dB, so it's cutting about 2 dB right here. Just kind of taking that harsh edge out of my voice a little bit and making it sound a little smoother. Now, if you pop this out of automatic mode, you get a lot more control. You can choose the frequency you want to cut here in the middle. If you hold down, for example, the Option key on a Mac, you can use the scroller on your mouse or your touchpad and widen or narrow that a little bit. You can also do a high frequency boost if maybe you're not getting a lot of crispness in the sound. You need to boost that up. You can do that here. Or, of course, you can choose where to roll it off or where to get rid of some of that low frequency noise. And then, of course, you can choose how much makeup gain to apply. So if you've done all these cuts here, what happens is that, in essence, the overall sound gets quieter. So you can boost the gain up after it's done this processing. That's what makeup gain does. In this case, I'd probably go with the automatic mode. It did a pretty nice job on that, so I would trust it. And then finally, we have our loudness boost. We can go ahead and use this to target the loudness that we want for our final video. And in this case, we're targeting minus 16 LUFS. The target is LUFS, not decibels. LUFS is loudness units full scale. It is a more precise way to measure perceived loudness, the way that we humans hear loudness. And so typically, if you're going to be posting your video online somewhere, I would generally recommend for videos that are not primarily music, if they're primarily spoken word, I would normally target around minus 16. And this just makes that automatic for you. All you have to do is drag the line to minus 16, set it to automatic mode, and it automatically does it. You can see it will dynamically adjust the levels. I'll play through it a little bit here. We're going to get into Davinci Resolve just a little bit, specifically the Fairlight panel. The Fairlight panel is, of course, the digital audio workstation part of Davinci Resolve. And it's pretty amazing that Davinci Resolve includes not only a video editing app, color grading, compositing, and digital audio workstation all in one. It is also very affordable. So that's doing a pretty nice job. You can see I kind of tried to trick it by pulling the loudness down quite a bit and then boosting it back to minus 16. And it takes it a while to adjust, but once it figures it out, it definitely does a nice job of getting your overall levels close to where they need to be. So there, my friends, is a look at DialogueEnhance2 for those of you that need something very simple that can run from your nonlinear editor, your video editing app. This is a pretty good choice, whether that be Premiere, Final Cut Pro, Davinci Resolve, whatever. Hope that was helpful. Get out there and make some great sound, and we'll talk to you again next week.